In our recent episodes, we looked at the growing pressure on America's power grid as AI and massive data centers drive unprecedented demand. We explored the key stakeholders and the lack of alignment between government, big tech, the power industry, and everyday consumers. We also unpacked Texas Senate Bill 6, the first real blueprint for managing this surge while protecting the grid. Today, we take the next step and examine how national policy could help or complicate the path forward.
All right, welcome back to On Energy. I'm your host, Scott Hart, Senior Vice President at Energy Business. Joining me today are two special guests, Aaron Bergman, Fellow Resource for the Future, Philip Rossetti, Resident Senior Fellow, R Street Institute. And we're very fortunate to have these two guys here today. We wanted to dig into one big, beautiful bill, or OB3 as I like to refer to it. And OB3 was signed July 4th, 2025. So we've had about four and a half months to really try to absorb the bill. And we think it's extremely topical around what we're trying to work through with the series. So with that being said, I want Aaron and Philip both to kind of give us a background on the advocacy positions of each one of the institutes that they represent. So Phil, can you kind of talk to us a little bit about R Street and where you guys are coming from?
Sure. So the R Street Institute is a non-partisan research institute. So, we don't have like any kind of advocacy positions. We try to just give what we call policy education to help people understand, hey, here's the effect of what's being proposed in Washington. So the R Street Institute is a free market-oriented think tank. So we're like a center-right think tank. And I get to work on energy environment issues there, which is certainly a lot of fun, and especially relevant with everything going on today with OB3. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Aaron, same thing. What do you get? Where are you guys coming from?
So Resources for the Future, also, we are a nonpartisan, non-advocacy organization. We don't take positions on specific legislations or policies. Our goal is to bring sort of academic level of rigor to policy questions to provide policymakers the best information they need to make decisions.
Got it. Obviously, this is an energy-related podcast. So I wanted to, kind of start at the highest level and talk about the major energy provisions in OB3 and how they differ from the Inflation Reduction Act. How to compare and contrast and what really happened there. So Aaron, you want to pick it up and kind of give me your perspective?
Sure. The Inflation Reduction Act put forth, I guess, a literal alphabet soup, because they're all named after different letters in the tax code, of tax credits, ranging from vehicles to residential energy efficiency, electricity, manufacturing. And it's, to be honest, it's a lot to keep track of, and I think we're going to focus mainly on electricity here, but the OBBBA, did I get the right number of B's in there? The One Big Beautiful Bill Act shortened most of them, so they expired significantly earlier, and also for many of them added provisions that are related, called Foreign Energy of Concern, which sort of restricts some of the equipment and sort of ownership that can be used in order to be able to claim the tax credits.
And Philip, from your perspective, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so to kind of give a little bit more meat on that, because Aaron gave like the 101, but some of the big things with the Inflation Reduction Act is it massively increased the amount of energy-related subsidies in the United States, and it especially set some guidelines for when those subsidies would be phased out based on emission targets. So they would essentially, on the electricity side, they would act in perpetuity until we actually hit those targets. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, OB3, the main thing it did was curtail those significantly. So instead of it being kind of this ongoing subsidy, especially for renewable energy sources, it says, okay, you got to either build this right away, and even if you do, you have to keep building it, and these subsidies are gonna get phased out very quickly. So it's basically after 1 year you have to start construction within a year. So that, along with everything else, really pares back a lot of the cost of these subsidies.
And I should say that's like for wind and solar, they significantly shortened it. They didn't actually do it for other clean technology in that space, like geothermal or nuclear. But there are these Foreign Entity of Concern, FEOC, the DC lingo, that will change that. They also made some changes to the carbon capture tax credit. Previously, you received less money if the carbon you captured was utilized in some way rather than put in the ground. And when OB3 increased that levels to sort of parity so that both of those, either whether or not the carbon is used or is put in the ground, receives the same amount of tax credit.
Yeah, when we kind of look historically over the past 25 years, you had an electrification phase that was all about driving a lower carbon economy. The implications of that were bringing in a lot of renewable energy at scale, and we've seen that across North America, while at the same time reducing our reliance on coal and natural gas for power generation, and to some extent EVs replacing gasoline and diesel in certain settings. And while that continues and OB3, I guess ultimately will eliminate tax incentives, at least through this administration, how will this impact private investment in clean energy technologies? Are you guys seeing or hearing things about what it really means for the incentives that private investment had in clean energy technology?
I don't have any specifics. It's still relatively soon. Anytime you increase the cost of something, you're likely to see less of it, and I think that's inevitable. I think the other sort of just point of, I don't know if I want to say just, as far as I know, like last I checked, they have not issued the guidance on these fiat provisions, and I think without having a lot of certainty there, it's going to be hard to figure out some of the investments in order to sort of do this. So I think there is still a lot of just uncertainty about, that people need to be resolved in order to sort of go forward with investments. Now, some of the investments can be made under the previous regime if you had things already in the pipeline, but sort of going forward, I think there's a lot of these uncertainties that need to be resolved.
All right. So there are a couple things I think about with this question. So as kind of like a 101 economics, whenever you subsidize something, you can expect to have more of it. It's just kind of a function of, hey, there's more capital in this area, so therefore there's going to be more activity. But the effectiveness of that capital and actually inducing that activity, so how much like clean energy investment we see with or without these subsidies, depends on a lot of factors. And when we look at clean energy, one of the questions is how much of the subsidies are actually inducing like this marginal uptake, and how much of this clean energy investment would have occurred because of like renewable portfolio standards in states, or because there's a huge private sector interest in these technologies anyway, or are these being held back by permitting issues, et cetera. The other thing to keep in mind is, even though we can say, okay, if you take away the subsidies, you're going to get less investment in this industry, we also need to keep in mind the big picture, which is any dollar you spend on subsidy means that you're going to have to tax a dollar either now or in the future. So you're taking away a dollar from somewhere else in the economy. So there's this kind of like interactive effect of, okay, we're getting less investment in this sector, but how does this affect other sectors? And that could be other energy sectors, or it could be other areas of capital interest like, AI. So there's all these complex moving parts. But I think if you're going to say, what's the effect? It's going to be less investment because subsidies induce investment. And if you take them away, that's what happens.
If you remove these tax incentives for renewables, and Philip, to your point, you're just moving a dollar from here to there from somewhere else. Ultimately, what should we expect? How will private money start investing? Is that something you guys are familiar with? Like, so it'll be less renewables per se, and more nuclear, and more potentially natural gas investment. We're talking about generation. That's the question I want to get to.
All right.
Is that a legitimate question?
So this is a really interesting question, because you're getting into kind of like all of the fun, complex questions that it's really hard to know. So from kind of like a basic economics perspective, ignore like AI and energy and everything else. There is always this understanding that taxes induce what we call a deadweight loss, which means that there is a opportunity cost that is present from levying the tax, because you assume that the people who have the money know what they want to spend the money on. And if you take it away by government force and redirect it, you're assuming that there's some sort of less efficient ordering of capital because of that. Now, there can be some improvements from these policies if you're saying, okay, we've identified something that the private sector is just not really valuing correctly, whether that's like an environmental outcome, what they call an externality, or it could be like a national security thing, which is something that comes up a lot with the AI stuff. So there's this kind of interactive effect of like, okay, if you're pulling back subsidies, you're going to end up with a more efficient allocation of capital in terms of incentivizing private sector profitability and more GDP uptake. But you might not get as much investment in areas that private sector just doesn't view as important because it's not as profitable, but it might have a bigger interest. So it's hard to say like what's the specific effect, but I think the key thing to keep in mind is that there might be better policies to get to that outcome than just saying we're going to subsidize renewable energy, right? Like if you want more AI, then it might not be the right approach to say, hey, we're going to subsidize renewable energy. It might be we're going to remove some of these barriers to market entry for any energy type or for AI data centers or what have you, or transmission that can help to power these data centers. So that sort of like effectiveness of policy is important because we always have multiple options here.
Right. Aaron, what's your thoughts on it?
I did want to push back a little bit. I think I generally agree with everything Philip said about the economics. This only holds, though, if the electric sector is currently pricing efficiently, as, the economic literature. And there is a lot of evidence that there's some interesting research out of Berkeley that electricity prices are too high compared to sort of the economic ideal. So there are situations where these sort of subsidies can make things better off. I'm not going to say these ones necessarily do. It's a really hard calculation to do, but just to say that, the world is very complex, particularly electricity. And for the same reason, it's very hard for me to sort of say what the outcomes will be, especially in this unprecedented level of demand. I think we're already seeing a lot of shifting to natural gas to the extent that there's shortages in turbines and people maybe are moving to less efficient turbines and the price of turbines have gone up. When you get to sort of technologies like nuclear and geothermal, which, maybe are less well demonstrated, we will have to see.
Don't miss part 2, where we continue to explore how the One Big Beautiful Bill may accelerate or complicate the future of U.S. energy.